All right, hi y'all. We're just gonna wait a couple minutes to allow everybody to get into the room. Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and start. So I sent in the chat, it's called Jamboard, and we're going to be using that for this event. So if each of y'all want to go ahead and pull that up, that'd be great. I'll explain more of that when we get to it. Basically, for this event, we will be showing two videos, both great videos. So really pay attention to those, and we'll be having some discussion questions along with it, and those will be answered on Jamboard. And so yeah, I'm just very excited for y'all to be here. Thank you guys. All right, we'll go ahead and start. All right, so first we just wanted to start out with defining a couple terms. Masculinity is a set of attributes and behaviors that are associated with men. It has been and still is socially constructed. In its narrow definition, it's a degree of masculine or manly challenging traditional notions. Toxic masculinity is traditional masculine norms that can be harmful to men, women, and society. All right, so here's where we're gonna go onto Jamboard. The link is in the chat. I will go there myself. All right, so Jamboard. So here's what you're gonna do. On Jamboard, you'll see that there's questions, and with they're all here, see? And so what you're gonna do to answer the questions, you will click on the fourth one down on the left side, it's sticky note, and then you would answer your question here, whatever, click save, and then it gets posted. All right, so I will go ahead and read the questions aloud to y'all, and if you want to put your answers down to what you think. All right, so the first question is, how would you describe what it means to be manly? So like, how does it look? How does it act? What are some characteristics about it? So I'll give you a couple minutes to answer that on Jamboard. And when you're done with that, you can click to the next page and answer those questions as well. The second question is, what are some difficulties men can face in the world? And the third is, what are some character traits of toxic masculinity? And the fourth is, how has masculinity changed in the past year? So definitely put your thoughts on Jamboard, and I would love to see your answers. All right, we'll take a couple more minutes with that. All right, I'm seeing some pretty good answers on Jamboard. So yeah, it's definitely applies to what we're doing today. So now we will be going to our first video. Um, and definitely pay attention because there will be some discussion questions after that. I will go ahead and play it. It's called Man Box by Tony Porter. He's very highly recommended, and this video is just a great, very informational and very eye-opening. So I'll go ahead and play that. Y'all can continue answering some of the questions if you'd like. So yeah, here we go.
So I grew up in New York City, between Harlem and the Bronx. Growing up as a boy, we was taught that men had to be tough, had to be strong, had to be courageous, dominating, no pain, no emotions, with the exception of anger and definitely no fear. That men are in charge, which means women are not. That men lead, and you should just follow and just do what we say. That men are superior, women are inferior. That men are strong, women are weak. That women are of less value, property of men, and objects, particularly sexual objects. I've later come to know that to be the collective socialization of men, better known as the man box. See, this man box has in it all the ingredients of how we define what it means to be a man. Now, I also want to say, without a doubt, there are some wonderful, wonderful, absolutely wonderful things about being a man. Well, at the same time, there's some stuff that's just straight up twisted. And we really need to begin to challenge, look at it, and really get in the process of deconstructing, redefining what we come to know as manhood. This is my two at home, Kendall and Jade. They're 11 and 12. Kendall's 15 months older than Jade. There's a period of time, when my wife, her name is Tammy, and we just got real busy and whip it, bit, bam, boom, Kendall and Jade. All right? And when they were about 5 and 6, 4 and 5, Jade could come to me. It didn't matter, come to me crying, It didn't matter what she was crying about. She can get on my knees. She can snot my sleeve up, just cry it out. Daddy got you. That's all that's important. Now, Kendall, on the other hand, and like I said, he's only 15 months older than her, he come to me crying. It's like as soon as I would hear him crying, a clock would go off. I would give the boy probably about 30 seconds, which means by the time he got to me, I was already saying things like, why you crying? Hold your head up. Look at me. Explain to me what's wrong. Tell me what's wrong. I can't understand you while you're crying. And out of my own frustration of my role and responsibility of building him up as a man to fit into these guidelines and these structures that are defining this man box, I would find myself saying things like, just go in your room. Just go on in your room, sit down, get yourself together, and come back and talk to me when you could talk to me like a what? Like a man. And he's 5 years old. And as I grow in life, I would say to myself, my God, what's wrong with me? What am I doing? Why would I do this? And I think back to my father. There was a time in my life where we had a very troubled experience in our family. My brother Henry, he died tragically when we was teenagers. We lived in New York City, as I said. We lived in the Bronx at the time. And the burial was a place called Long Island. It was about 2 hours outside of the city. And as we were preparing to come back from the burial, the cars stopped at the bathroom, to let folks take care of themselves before the long ride back to the city. And the limousine empties out. My mother, my sisters, my auntie, they all get out, but my father and I stayed in the limousine. And no sooner than the women got out, he burst out crying. He didn't want to cry in front of me, but he knew he wasn't going to make it back to the city. It was better me than to allow himself to express these feelings and emotions in front of the women. And this is a man who 10 minutes ago had just put his teenage son in the ground. something I just can't even imagine. The thing that sticks with me the most is that he was apologizing to me for crying in front of me. And at the same time, he was also giving me props, lifting me up for not crying. You know, I come to also look at this as this fear that we have as men, this fear that just have us paralyzed, holding us hostage to this man box. I can remember speaking to a 12-year-old boy, a football player, and I asked him, I said, how would you feel if in front of all the players, your coach told you you were playing like a girl? Now, I expected him to say something like, I'll be sad, I'll be mad, I'll be angry, or something like that. No, the boy said to me, it would destroy me. And I said to myself, God, if it would destroy him to be called a girl, what are we then teaching him about girls? It took me back to a time when I was about 12 years old. I grew up in tenement buildings, you know, in the inner city, and at this time we're living in the Bronx. And in the building next to where I lived, there was a guy named Johnny. He's about 16 years old, and we were all about 12 years old, younger guys, and he was hanging out with all us younger guys. And this guy, he was up to a lot of no good. He was the kind of kid where parents would have to wonder, what is this 16-year-old boy doing with these 12-year-old boys? And he did spend a lot of time up to no good. He was a troubled kid. You know, his mother had died from a heroin overdose. He was being raised by his grandmother. His father wasn't on the set. His grandmother had 2 jobs. He was home alone a lot. But I got to tell you, we young guys, we looked up to this dude, man. He was cool. He was fine. That's what his sister said. He was fine, right? He was having sex. You know, we all looked up to him. So one day I'm out in front of the house doing something, just playing around, doing something, I don't know what. He looks out his window, he calls me upstairs. He said, hey, Amp, they called me Anthony growing up as a kid. Hey, Anthony, come on upstairs. Johnny called, you go. So I run right upstairs. As he opens the door, he says to me, do you want some? Now, I immediately knew what he meant, because for me growing up at that time and our relationship with this man box, do you want some meant one or two things, sex or drugs. And we weren't doing drugs. Now, my box, my card, my man box card was immediately in jeopardy. 2 things. One, I never had sex. We don't talk about that as men. You only tell your dearest, closest friends, sworn to secrecy for life, the first time you had sex. For everybody else, we go around like we've been having sex since we was 2. There ain't no first time. The other thing I couldn't tell them is that I didn't want any. You know, that's even worse. We're supposed to always be on the prowl. Women are objects, especially sexual objects. So anyway, I couldn't tell him any of that. So like my mother would say, make a long story short, I just simply said to Johnny, yes. He told me go in his room. I go in his room, on his bed is a girl from the neighborhood named Sheila. She's 16 years old, she's nude. She is what I know today to be mentally ill, higher functioning at times than others. We had a whole choice worth, you know, inappropriate names for her. Anyway, Johnny had just gotten through having sex with her. Well, he actually raped her, but he would say he had sex with her because while Sheila never said no, she also never said yes. So he was offering me the opportunity to do the same. So when I go in the room, I close the door. Folks, I'm petrified. I stand with my back to the door so Johnny can't bust in the room and see that I'm not doing anything. And I stand there long enough that I could have actually done something. So now I'm no longer trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get out of this room. So in my 12 years of wisdom, I zip my pants down, I walk out into the living room, and lo and behold to me, while I was in the room with Sheila, Johnny was back at the window calling guys up. So now it's a living room full of guys, like, you know, like the waiting room in the doctor's office. And they asked me, how was it? And I say to them, it was good. And I zip my pants up in front of them, and I head for the door. Now, I say this all with remorse, and I was feeling a tremendous amount of remorse at that time, but I was conflicting, because while I was feeling remorse, I was excited, because I didn't get caught, but I knew I felt bad about what was happening. This fear of getting outside the man box totally enveloped me. It was way more important to me about me and my man box card than about Sheila and what was happening to her. See, collectively, we as men are taught to have less value in women, to view them as property and the objects of men. We see that as an equation that equals violence against women. We as men, good men, the large majority of men, we operate on the foundation of this whole collective socialization. We kind of see ourselves separate, but we're very much a part of it. You see, we have to come to understand that less value, property, and objectification is the foundation, and the violence can't happen without it. So we're very much a part of the solution as well as the problem. The Centers for Disease Control says that men's violence against women is at epidemic proportions. It's the #1 health concern for women in this country and abroad. So quickly, I'd like to just say, this is my love of my life, my daughter Jade. The world I envision for her. How do I want men to be acting and behaving? I need you on board. I need you with me. I need you working with me and me working with you on how we raise our sons and teach them to be men. That it's okay to not be dominating. That it's okay to have feelings and emotions. That it's okay to promote equality. That it's okay to have women who are just friends and that's it. That it's okay to be whole. That my liberation as a man is tied to your liberation as a woman. I remember asking a 9-year-old boy, what would life be like for you if you didn't have to adhere to this man box? He said to me, I would be free. Thank you, folks.
All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the video. It's very eye-opening. So now we will be going back to Jamboard and answering some questions. So I will go ahead and introduce 2 of the questions, and then Michaela will introduce the other 2. What are some things that you believe would be in a man box? How can the man box be teaching toxic masculinity?
In the video, do you notice how harmful this man box can be on a man? What were some examples? If men were allowed to break through their man box, do you believe that could be beneficial to women? If so, how?
All right, so I will go to Jamboard and we will open those up for discussion. So it starts on page 5 and then it goes to page 8. I'll give you all some time to answer those questions. All right, so you can go ahead and look at some of these answers. So what are some things that you believe would be in a man box? One of the things that I really liked, one of the answers was adhering to stereotypes or images they don't believe in. Um, if y'all have any more, if y'all want to discuss it a little more and like tell me why you thought that, um, go ahead and answer. Or like feeling like you can't express yourself thoroughly through fashion. That's a great one as well. Having an I don't care attitude, another great point. Another thing that would be in a man box. If anyone wants to share why they thought that way. All right, we can go to the next question. How can the man box teach masculinity or teach toxic masculinity? Men feel like they can't be virgins, so they end up telling false stories about women. This happened in the TED Talk with the girl who was raped and the speaker pretended to have sex with her. Yes, I thought that was a very telling part of the TED Talk. I thought it was really applied to a lot of men in the world. One of the things that I thought was so interesting that he said, he's like, we don't tell men when the first time we had sex. Everybody goes about like they have been having sex since they were 2. And I think that's a big stigma around men in society. Teaches men to disrespect women, definitely. May make them think they are above women, definitely. And he mentioned that women are often seen as objects and that we own them. It teaches boys that society has a certain standard for them, and if they don't fit inside this standard, then they are seen as less manly or weak. Exactly, yeah. Feeling like you have to have sex with women even without their consent at times. Definitely from the video, I thought that was a crazy part. And do you think that if something, since he didn't do anything, but other men were planning to, do you think him saying something would have encouraged the other men not to? Y'all can also use the chat to give your feedback as well. Lindsay said they probably still would have done it, but he should have tried, but he didn't want to be vulnerable. Yes, definitely. I think toxic masculinity kind of makes men not want to be vulnerable. It kind of puts them in this box that they can't feel emotion, and that's exactly what the man box is. It traps everything that they think about doing that's correct, and then they do the exact opposite because they are worried of what their friends think or other men think. All right, we can go to the next question.
How can the man box be harmful on men? Any examples? Not being able to be free. Yeah, meaning like the man box does trap you and not being able to express your emotions. Setting the ideal characteristics men should follow, even though they shouldn't. Yes. Men are pressured to have sex from a young age, even if they don't want to. This can be mentally and emotionally draining, definitely. Especially from the video, they were so young, hanging out with somebody older than them. I think that did have an impact on them and everybody else around them being at such a young age. They might have to act out if they feel contained or restricted by the stereotypes we have in society. Yeah, there are a lot of restrictions in society that we believe that men should act, dress, and look a certain way, and that's just not right. It's not fair for them. It can make men feel constrained, definitely. If you guys have anything else, you can put in the chat or just go back on the Jamboard and write some more.
I think also the lack of emotion that can honestly like bring men into a depression. And I know a lot of men don't want to say that they are in a depression, but it's real and it happens. It also like gives them more of like a lonely aspect to themselves. They don't feel as they can be them truly themselves around other men. So yeah, that all goes with the mental health aspect of it as well.
Hannah, will you go to the next question? If a man box wasn't a thing, could it be beneficial to women? How so? Maybe some men would be more caregiving towards their children instead of sometimes relying on women to take care of families and households. That is definitely a stereotype that has been around for forever, that women have to be the like caregivers and the men are the money makers for the family. And I think how our society is changing for men to be a little bit more feminine and be able to express their emotions without having to feel shame or anything like that. I think that's a huge stereotype. Now you just said on average more men commit suicide rather than women, and I think the lack of emotion they are allowed to show plays a huge part in that. I definitely agree. I think if men were allowed to show more emotions and not be judged for it, I do think that that percentage would go down. Moms wouldn't feel like they need to be tough on their little boys when they cry. I definitely think that's a big thing, especially in the video. He was talking about the difference he would treat his daughter compared to his son. And then I think he did realize that being able to treat his daughter differently than his son was wrong. And so when boys cry, it's not anything to be ashamed of or to feel judged for. It would psychologically change the way men think, and as a product of that way of thought would most likely keep women safer from men. I agree 100%. One of the biggest issues I would say for women is having to deal with men and anything like because they're scared in situations, especially the girl in the video, not being able to really give consent to having sex. I really think if they were able to express like they don't want to or they don't feel comfortable with it, women would feel a lot safer for sure. Let's see. Yeah, less sexual and physical violence against women. That's a big deal because the man box is so trapping to where they're not able to express their emotions. And if they were, women would be more comfortable around men.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would think if a man box wasn't a thing, I think men and women would be able to have more healthy relationships. And I feel like that would definitely help women a lot more.
If anybody else has anything you wanted to add and didn't want to put on the Jamboard, you're more than welcome to put in the chat. Yeah.
All right, we have another video for you. So after that video, just keep that in mind. So now we'll go to another video. This video is Why I'm Done Trying to Be Man Enough by Justin Baldoni. And you'll recognize him when the video comes on, most likely you will. And it's just a really great talk. So I'm excited to share this with you.
As an actor, I get scripts. And it's my job to stay on script, to say my lines, and bring to life a character that someone else wrote. Over the course of my career, I've had the great honor playing some of the greatest male role models ever represented on television. You might recognize me as male escort number one, photographer, date rapist, shirtless date rapist from the award-winning Spring Break Shark Attack, shirtless medical student, a shirtless steroid-using con man, and in my most well-known role as Raphael, a brooding, reformed playboy who falls for, of all things, a virgin, and who's only occasionally shirtless. Now, these roles don't represent the kind of man I am in my real life, but that's what I love about acting. I get to live inside characters very different than myself. But every time I got one of these roles, I was surprised, because most of the men I play ooze machismo, charisma, and power. And when I look in the mirror, that's just not how I see myself. But it was how Hollywood saw me. And over time, I noticed a parallel between the roles I would play as a man, both on screen and off. I've been pretending to be a man that I'm not my entire life. I've been pretending to be strong when I felt weak, confident when I felt insecure, and tough when really I was hurting. I think for the most part, I've just been kind of putting on a show. But I'm tired of performing. And I can tell you right now that it is exhausting trying to be man enough for everyone all the time. Now, right? My brother heard that. Now, for as long as I can remember, I've been told the kind of man that I should grow up to be. As a boy, all I wanted was to be accepted and liked by the other boys. But that acceptance meant I had to acquire this almost disgusted view of the feminine. And since we were told that feminine is the opposite of masculine, I either had to reject embodying any of these qualities or face rejection myself. This is the script that we've been given, right? Girls are weak and boys are strong. This is what's being subconsciously communicated to hundreds of millions of young boys and girls all over the world, just like it was with me. Well, I came here today to say, as a man, that this is wrong, this is toxic, and it has to end. Now, I'm not here to give a history lesson. We likely all know how we got here, okay? But I'm just a guy that woke up after 30 years and realized that I was living in a state of conflict. Conflict with who I feel I am in my core, and conflict with who the world tells me as a man I should be. But I don't have a desire to fit into the current broken definition of masculinity, because I don't just want to be a good man. I want to be a good human. And I believe the only way that can happen is if men learn to not only embrace the qualities that we were told are feminine in ourselves, but to be willing to stand up, to champion and learn from the women who embody them. Now, men, I'm not saying that everything we've learned is toxic, okay? I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with you or me. And men, I'm not saying we have to stop being men. But we need balance, right? We need balance. And the only way things will change is if we take a real honest look at the scripts that have been passed down to us from generation to generation, and the roles that, as men, we choose to take on in our everyday lives. So speaking of scripts, the first script I ever got came from my dad. My dad is awesome. He's loving, he's kind, he's sensitive, he's nurturing, he's here. He's crying. But, sorry, Dad, as a kid, I resented him for it, because I blamed him for making me soft, which wasn't welcomed in the small town in Oregon that we had moved to, because being soft meant that I was bullied. See, my dad wasn't traditionally masculine, so he didn't teach me how to use my hands. He didn't teach me how to hunt, how to fight, man stuff. Instead, he taught me what he knew: that being a man was about sacrifice and doing whatever you can to take care of and provide for your family. But there was another role I learned how to play from my dad, who I discovered learned it from his dad, a state senator who later in life had to work nights as a janitor to support his family. And he never told a soul. That role was to suffer in secret. And now 3 generations later, I find myself playing that role too. So why couldn't my grandfather just reach out to another man and ask for help? Why does my dad to this day still think he's got to do it all on his own? I know men who would rather die than tell another man that they're hurting. But it's not because we're just all like strong, silent types. It's not. A lot of us men are really good at making friends and talking, just not about anything real. If it's about work, or sports, or politics, or women, we have no problem sharing our opinions. But if it's about our insecurities or our struggles, our fear of failure, then it's almost like we become paralyzed. At least I do. So some of the ways that I've been practicing breaking free of this behavior are by creating experiences that force me to be vulnerable. So if there's something I'm experiencing shame around in my life, I practice diving straight into it, no matter how scary it is, and sometimes even publicly. Because then in doing so, I take away its power. And my display of vulnerability can, in some cases, give other men permission to do the same. As an example, a little while ago, I was wrestling with an issue in my life that I knew I needed to talk to my guy friends about. But I was so paralyzed by fear that they would judge me and see me as weak, and I would lose my standing as a leader, that I knew I had to take them out of town on a 3-day guys trip just to open up. And guess what? It wasn't until the end of the 3rd day that I finally found the strength to talk to them about what I was going through. But when I did, something amazing happened. I realized that I wasn't alone, because my guys had also been struggling. And as soon as I found the strength and the courage to share my shame, it was gone. Now, I've learned over time that if I want to practice vulnerability, then I need to build myself a system of accountability. So I've been really blessed as an actor. I've built a really wonderful fan base, really, really sweet and engaged. And so I decided to use my social platform as kind of this Trojan horse, wherein I could create a daily practice of authenticity and vulnerability. The response has been incredible. It's been affirming, it's been heartwarming. I get tons of love and press and positive messages daily. But it's all from a certain demographic. Women. This is real. Why are only women following me? Where are the men? About a year ago, I posted this photo. Now, afterwards, I was scrolling through some of the comments, and I noticed that one of my female fans had tagged her boyfriend in the picture. And her boyfriend responded by saying, "Please stop tagging me in gay shit." Thanks. As if being gay makes you less of a man, right? So I took a deep breath, and I responded. I said very politely that I was just curious, because I'm on an exploration of masculinity, and I wanted to know why my love for my wife qualified as gay shit. And then I said, honestly, I just wanted to learn. Now, he immediately wrote me back. I thought he was going to go off on me, but instead he apologized. He told me how growing up, public displays of affection were looked down on. He told me that he was wrestling and struggling with his ego, and how much he loved his girlfriend and how thankful he was for her patience. And then a few weeks later, he messaged me again. This time he sent me a photo of him on one knee proposing. And all he said was, "Thank you." I've been this guy. I get it. See, publicly, he was just playing his role, rejecting the feminine, right? But secretly, he was waiting for permission to express himself, to be seen, to be heard, and all he needed was another man holding him accountable and creating a safe space for him to feel, and the transformation was instant. I loved this experience because it showed me that transformation is possible, even over direct messages. So I wanted to figure out how I could reach more men, but of course, none of them were following me. So I tried an experiment. I started posting more stereotypically masculine things. Like my challenging workouts, my meal plans, my journey to heal my body after an injury. And guess what happened? Men started to write me. And then, out of the blue, for the first time in my entire career, a male fitness magazine called me. And they said they wanted to honor me as one of their game changers. Is that really game changing? Or is it just conforming? And see, that's the problem. It's totally cool for men to follow me when I talk about guy stuff and I conform to gender norms. But if I talk about how much I love my wife or my daughter or my 10-day-old son, how I believe that marriage is challenging but beautiful, or how as a man I struggle with body dysmorphia, or if I promote gender equality, then only the women show up. Where are the men? So men. I understand. Growing up, we tend to challenge each other. We got to be the toughest, the strongest, the bravest men that we can be. And for many of us, myself included, our identities are wrapped up in whether or not at the end of the day we feel like we're man enough. But I got a challenge for all the guys, because men love challenges. I challenge you to see if you can use the same qualities that you feel make you a man to go deeper into yourself. Your strength, your bravery, your toughness. Can we redefine what those mean and use them to explore our hearts? Are you brave enough to be vulnerable? To reach out to another man when you need help? To dive headfirst into your shame? Are you strong enough to be sensitive? To cry whether you are hurting or you're happy, even if it makes you look weak? Are you confident enough to listen to the women in your life? To hear their ideas and their solutions, to hold their anguish and actually believe them, even if what they're saying is against you? And will you be man enough to stand up to other men when you hear locker room talk? When you hear stories of sexual harassment, when you hear your boys talking about grabbing ass or getting her drunk, will you actually stand up and do something so that one day we don't have to live in a world where a woman has to risk everything and come forward to say the words, "Me too"? This is serious stuff. I've had to take a real honest look at the ways that I've unconsciously been hurting the women in my life. And it's ugly. My wife told me that I had been acting in a certain way that hurt her and not correcting it. Basically, sometimes when she would go to speak, at home or in public, I would just cut her off mid-sentence and finish her thought for her. It's awful. The worst part was that I was completely unaware when I was doing it. It was unconscious. So here I am doing my part, trying to be a feminist, amplifying the voices of women around the world, and yet at home, I am using my louder voice to silence the woman I love the most. So I had to ask myself a tough question. Am I man enough to just shut the hell up and listen? I gotta be honest, I wish that didn't get an applause. Guys, this is real. And I'm just scratching the surface here because the deeper we go, the uglier it gets, I guarantee you. I don't have time to get into porn and violence against women or the split of domestic duties or the gender pay gap. But I believe that as men, it's time we start to see past our privilege and recognize that we are not just part of the problem, fellas, we are the problem. The glass ceiling exists because we put it there. And if we want to be a part of the solution, then words are no longer enough. There's a quote that I love that I grew up with from the Baha'i writings. It says that the world of humanity is possessed of two wings, the male and the female. So long as these two wings are not equivalent in strength, the bird will not fly. So women, on behalf of men all over the world who feel similar to me, please forgive us for all the ways that we have not relied on your strength. And now I would like to ask you to formally help us, because we cannot do this alone. We are men. We're going to mess up. We're going to say the wrong thing. We're going to be tone deaf. We're more than likely probably going to offend you. But don't lose hope. We're only here because of you. And like you, as men, we need to stand up and become your allies as you fight against pretty much everything. We need your help in celebrating our vulnerability and being patient with us as we make this very, very long journey from our heads to our hearts. And finally, to parents. Instead of teaching our children to be brave boys or pretty girls, can we maybe just teach them how to be good humans? So back to my dad. Growing up, yeah, like every boy, I had my fair share of issues. But now I realize that it was even thanks to his sensitivity and emotional intelligence that I'm able to stand here right now talking to you in the first place. The resentment I had for my dad, I now realize had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with me and my longing to be accepted and to play a role that was never meant for me. So while my dad may have not taught me how to use my hands, he did teach me how to use my heart. And to me, that makes him more of a man than anything. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce the first three questions and then Macy is going to read the last three. So, what is man enough? What feminine qualities should men embody? And what is powerful to see Justin Baldoni, Fathers Crying?
Number 4 is what is soft and how is that an insult? What is fear of failure and how is that threatening to men? And how can men reach men? How can women reach men?
And those questions will be on Jamboard as well. They're the next few pages. We'll give you all a couple minutes to answer those.
Okay, so what is man enough? Having a strong or tough exterior, being bold or courageous enough to do things to prove you aren't weak. Yeah, I think men have to like always feel like they have to prove themselves to other men, or like boys have to prove themselves to boys. And I think they just always feel like they have to go like just always one up the other and just always prove that they're like the manlier one out of the group. Yeah, they always have to feel like they're strong and masculine. Man enough typically means to be tough enough to face your problems. In the TED Talk, he means to be vulnerable and embrace feminine qualities. Yeah, I think Justin Baldoni does a really good job of like being vulnerable up there and talking about how he's sensitive and he's starting to like embrace those feminine qualities about himself that he kind of pushed away when he was younger. And man enough is kind of like the man box, expectations that men need to be a certain way. Yeah, I think they both go hand in hand like really well. And just kind of talk about the same qualities that men kind of have to feel like they have to have. Yeah, if you have anything else, you can put it in the chat, but if not, that's fine. What are some feminine qualities that men should embody? Compassion, sensitivity, selflessness, and emotional. Yeah, I feel like now, like men are able to like be compassionate and sensitive and emotional, and it's not like such a big deal as it was like back in the day. I feel like it's now more acceptable, which is a great thing. Being able to dress how they want. Women get to wear men's clothing with no judgment, but when men wear dresses, or when men dress more feminine, they get judged. So yeah, I think that's really important. Okay, and then was it powerful to see Justin Baldoni's father crying? Yes, I think it showed he knew he fathered him in the right way. Yeah, I feel like that was really powerful to see as well. So yeah, we can go to the next one.
I'm sorry, I did not mean to do that. Oh my gosh. What is soft? How is that an insult to men? Soft is the opposite of manly. It's an insult because it means that the person is weak or emotional. I think yes, yeah, I agree with that. You know, there's like the opposition to go up against women. So like being soft is like feminine, and so I think if people just remember to be human, they would get rid of like the opposition between women and men that Justin talked about. And it says showing emotions, it's not, but men take it as an insult because they want to be seen as manly instead. And men don't want to have characteristics of women because society has made such a divide that men don't want to feel oppressed like women are. And being vulnerable, people often tell men that they look weak for showing emotion or being vulnerable. And letting emotion show, it's not the toxic expectations of masculinity. And what is fear of failure and how is it threatening to men? And the answers are men are scared to ask for help because they think it makes them look weak. Failing is threatening to men because they're supposed to succeed in everything without help. They don't want to ask for help because they're told they're supposed to be able to do things on their own. Men fear losing or failing because that means they aren't doing their duties as a man and are seen as weak and more like a woman. Men are told they need to always win. This is dangerous because people can't always win in this life. men need to be okay with losing sometimes and learn how to deal with it. Yeah, I think that last comment is a good add-on to the topic, because you can't really learn if you never lose. And so I liked how at the end of the video that Justin, he like flipped it and was like, are you brave enough to, he would say like, are you brave enough? Are you confident enough to listen to women? And use like the other two, use the other two words and said some other things. But I think that's like a good way to end it, and like answering the question how they could like overcome their fear of failure. And how can men reach men? In the video, he was able to reach men by posting masculine things like workout videos. Men can let each other know that it's okay to express emotions and ask each other about their feelings. I was thinking about this question, and I was thinking like how it was interesting how the men started following him once he started conforming. Maybe if like male influencers started being more vulnerable, the ones that we all look up to, maybe society would start changing its mind about what masculinity looks like. And how can women reach men? Being there for them and always being prepared to listen without judgment. Men are scared to talk to other men about their struggles, but are more likely to open up to women. Women can ask about their feelings. That's a good answer.
I think also we could take like into the future that men and women could raise their children to, especially boys, to know that being vulnerable is okay and that it's accepted and they shouldn't shy away from it. And I think in the man box you saw that too when he was scolding his son for crying. And he was just saying like, he's like, why did I do that? Like I'm over here trying to teach him to be less of like the traditional masculine norm, and I'm over here scolding him for crying. So I think it also can have a huge influence with that, just in the way that we go forward in the future.
Yeah, I think with women and men, just like parents in general, too, could be used in the same way. Just teaching them, he said, like to be a better human instead of focusing on like being a pretty girl or like a brave man.
Yeah, if y'all have any comments or questions about the videos or something interesting that you thought, definitely share that. I would love to hear what y'all thought of it.
I thought it was really interesting to hear things from like a man's perspective, because I've always just thought like, oh no, men just like think that. Like I didn't really ever think about the reason why men think it the way they do about like women, and it was just really interesting to hear about like the man box and stuff, because like even growing up, like my dad didn't really like me or my brother crying, so it's just kind of interesting to hear how other people like raise their kids like differently when they're different genders.
Yeah, definitely. I know growing up, I've never seen my dad cry. So I think for my brother, he kind of felt that way too. Like that's not what men were supposed to do. When in reality, it's totally okay too. And I think the world is changing to the point where that's starting to become okay. And I think we just need to keep encouraging it for sure. Savannah said the videos are really interesting. We don't often see men expressing their fears or challenges in society. Exactly. And I think that's what a lot of the videos and the men in the videos are trying to get across. Like, say it's time for us to change. Like, we don't not everybody falls into this specific category of a man, and it should be accepted rather than shamed upon. Anybody else have any thoughts? Alrighty, well, we can just go ahead and end. Well, thank you guys so much for coming to our event. It really means a lot, and I hope y'all got something out of it today. I know I definitely have with preparing this presentation. So y'all have a great rest of your day, and yeah, just keep encouraging men. Yes. All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.